It's 6 p.m. on Wednesday here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Hong Ji-hye. And these are the top stories we're following at this hour. The Korean government lays out measures like cutting taxes on automobiles and home appliances to boost domestic consumption. The South Korean military lowers its highest alert level at the border, diffusing tensions in the wake of the breakthrough deal that have been reached by Seoul and Pyongyang. Plus, we look at how the resumption of war-separated family reunions agreed recently by the two sides will have on inter-Korean relations. Inviting all members of the ruling Saenuri Party for a luncheon at her office, President Park Geun-hye said it's now time to focus on reviving the economy and reforming Korean society. The president, who marks the midpoint of her 5-year term, specifically sought the party's cooperation in reforming the country's labor market aimed at creating more jobs and bringing down youth unemployment. President Park also asked the ruling party lawmakers to do everything they can to get reform and economy-related bills passed in the upcoming regular parliamentary session. The president has put forth reforms in 4 major sectors involving public, labor, education, and finance as her top priorities for the second half of this year. Ruling party leader Kim Moo-sung pledged his party's support for President Park's reform drive. And as part of efforts to boost the economy, the government has unveiled new plans to stimulate spending. Those who are about to buy home appliances or automobiles will want to take a careful listen at the measures that kick off tomorrow. Song Ji-sun reports.
MERS, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, has impacted Seoul more than last year's Hilda Ferry disaster in terms of recovering domestic consumption. Retail sales and the service sectors contracted at their sharpest rates in 4 years in June, with consumption sliding 0.3% from the first quarter. Deeming the recovery pace insufficient, Seoul announced new measures to rev up domestic consumption. Starting Friday, individual consumption tax on vehicles and large electronic goods like air conditioners will be reduced by 30% until the end of this year. This means the popular mid-size sedan Sonata will cost consumers about $420 less.
The benefits will only last until the end of the year for the reduction to be effective in boosting demand.
The Korea Grand Sale that started on 14th of August will continue well into October, as Seoul hopes to re-attract Chinese visitors to the country during China's National Day holiday that begins on the 1st of October. The Grand Sale will also be extended to traditional markets ahead of Korea's Chuseok holiday in September.
We want to create a boom in consumption that's been temporarily suppressed due to extraordinary circumstances.
Although the set of measures could reduce the amount of taxes collected, the government believes it could offset losses through increased consumer spending. Korea's finance ministry estimates that these measures will raise the country's annual economic growth rate by 0.025 percentage points. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
The two Koreas are lowering their defense posture after a breakthrough deal that was reached during inter-Korean talks held Tuesday. Military sources in Seoul say Pyongyang has been pulling their troops and heavy artillery back from the front line. Kim Hyun-bin has the details.
The South Korean military has gradually lowered its defense posture from the highest alert level prompted by heightened tensions with North Korea earlier this month. A military source says that the maximum alert order sent to the frontline military units is being scaled down. The source, however, added that the soldiers will remain in position of higher readiness than normal as a precautionary measure as the annual Korea-U.S. Joint Defensive Drill is currently taking place. There are signs that North Korea is also lowering its alert level after lifting its quasi-state of war status on Tuesday. North Korean troops on the border are returning to their regular footing, while heavy artillery on the front line has also been returned to its normal stance from combat ready. Both Koreas agreed to defuse tensions on the peninsula after a breakthrough was reached in high-level talks on Tuesday between the two countries. The two Koreas exchanged artillery fire last week after North Korea fired shells targeting South Korea's loudspeakers. The South Korean military commenced its psychological warfare activities after Pyongyang's landmine blast on the south side of the border that severely injured 2 South Korean soldiers. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Resuming reunions for families separated by the Korean War was one of the agreements reached between the two Koreas at the recent high-level talks. South Korea says it plans to begin preparations to hold the event in time for the Chuseok holiday next month. Hwang Sung-hee has the details.
South Korea said Wednesday it will begin preparations for what could be the first set of separated family reunions in nearly 2 years.
The issue of separated families is one of the most urgent matters to be resolved. Through calm preparations, the government will work towards holding the family reunions in time for Chuseok.
The resumption of reunions for war-separated families was one of the interkorean agreement reached on Tuesday. Since Chuseok, or Korean Thanksgiving holiday, falls at the end of September this year, the two Koreas have less than a month for preparations. The two sides are expected to hold working-level Red Cross talks early next month to discuss the details. Millions of family members were separated by the Korean War in the 1950s, but time is running out for the elderly victims. Out of the nearly 130,000 registered divided family members in the South, more than 50% are over the age of 80, and nearly half have already passed away. In her Liberation Day speech a couple of weeks ago, President Park Geun-hye had urged the North to help arrange reunions as a way to rebuild trust between Seoul and Pyongyang.
이산가족 문제만큼은 아무리 정세가 어렵고 이념이 대립한다고 해도 인도적 견지에서 남북이 근본적인 해결 방안을 찾아야 합니다.
South Korean efforts to resume the reunions have always been hampered by North Korea's demands that it receive something in return, such as the lifting of sanctions. Although the working-level talks in September may not be smooth sailing, some say the resumption of reunions could play a key role in expanding humanitarian exchanges between the two Koreas. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
While controversy hangs over the interpretation of North Korea's expression of regret for its recent landmine provocation, the United States has chosen to emphasize the importance of the two Koreas reaching an agreement through dialogue. Connie Kim tells us more.
The White House has welcomed the inter-Korean agreement that eased heightened military tensions on the Korean peninsula. U.S. Deputy Press Secretary Eric Schultz said Wednesday, Washington supports President Park Geun-hye's tireless efforts to improve the two Koreas' relations. Schultz added that the U.S.-South Korea alliance remains firm and will continue to work closely together. However, the U.S. remained tight-lipped on whether North Korea's expression of regret in the inter-Korean agreement can be considered an apology for the landmine provocation that injured 2 South Korean soldiers. Speaking at a regular press briefing on Tuesday, U.S. State Department spokesman John Kirby said it was inappropriate for Washington to characterize the difference between the words regret and apology. Kirby instead chose to emphasize that an agreement was reached and that President Park Geun-hye found acceptable the expression made by Pyongyang. In the 6-clause agreement released by the two Koreas on Tuesday, Pyongyang's expression of regret over the landmine blast that severed the legs of 2 South Korean soldiers was key to the halting of South Korea's loudspeaker broadcasts at the border. Seoul said it views the expression as a de facto apology, but some critics argue that it's difficult to accept it as an apology, citing the fact that Pyongyang did not promise to prevent another such accident from happening. Following the two Koreas' announcement, the U.S. immediately hailed the breakthrough deal, saying it'll continue to work closely with Seoul to promote peace and stability on the Korean peninsula. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Over at the National Assembly, a parliamentary defense committee reviewed the recent inter-Korean crisis with the nation's defense minister Han Minkoo attending the session. Lawmakers from both sides of the aisle praised the military's response during the recent inter-Korean confrontations, but grilled the defense minister on some specific details regarding the agreement reached on Tuesday. Some lawmakers questioned the clarity of the wording of the deal by the two Koreas. They particularly pointed out a clause in the agreement that states the South will stop its anti-Pyongyang propaganda broadcasts at the border unless abnormal situations happen. Han was asked whether the meaning of what constitutes abnormal has been agreed upon by both Koreas. The defense minister said he cannot simply give an answer for now, saying abnormality is something to be judged comprehensively by the government. A majority of South Koreans spoke positively about the Park Geun-hye administration's latest deal to diffuse tensions with North Korea. Pollster Realmeter says nearly 61% of 500 people surveyed said Seoul did a good job, while only 16% said it did not. Around 20% said they did not know. Asked what they thought about North Korea expressing regret for the recent landmine blasts in the demilitarized zone, 70% said they found it dissatisfactory, compared to 24% who said it's sufficient. But asked if they accept the expression of regret as a form of apology, 72% said yes. In an effort to attract more foreign investment, South Korea's Trade Ministry has announced new deregulation plans to help attract a foreign direct investment of $20 billion this year. Equipping the nation's free economic zones to turn them into a hub for foreign investments, Seoul will facilitate the hiring of more foreign professionals by raising the quota from the current 20% to 30% of total employees. Those working in the medical R&D sector will also be allowed to stay up to 5 years, from the current 3 years. The government will also set up logistics and business infrastructure to attract investors from China and Middle East to maximize the benefits of free trade deals in those regions. Foreign direct investment in Korea is on the rise, logging $10 billion in mid-July. Chinese shares dropped below healthy levels again on Wednesday, while stocks elsewhere seem to stabilize due to China's latest monetary policy. Nevertheless, there are concerns the China risk will remain a culprit for uncertainties lingering in the global economy. Kwon So-ah has this report.
With no clear signs China's stocks will recover this week, concerns are growing the country once a main growth engine in the global economy is out of fuel. The move by China's central bank to lower its key interest rate Tuesday did not help stabilize the main index, but it did have an effect elsewhere. Following China's rate cuts, many markets across the globe have been rebounding. Here in Korea, the benchmark Kospi and tech-heavy Kosdaq closed almost 2.6% and 3.4% higher than on Tuesday. But some say the 0.25 percentage points cut, the fifth since November last year, may not be enough.
The measure itself was appropriate, but a cut by 0.5 to 0.7 percentage points would have been more effective, and it should have come before the Shanghai Composite crashed, below the psychologically important 3,000 mark.
Questions are also being raised whether China's stock meltdown will negatively impact the U.S., as its central bank is shortly expected to decide whether to raise its key interest rate, which sits near zero.
The odds of that rate hike have certainly been diminished by the magnitude and the veracity of the market reaction over the last week. That is to say, we could still certainly see them move.
Before China's crash, the question was whether the hike will come in September or not. But the fresh question is whether it could even happen later, even next year. It's the uncertainties in these two biggest economies in the world that need to be eased for other countries to stabilize. That's why analysts say it will take until next month to get a clearer picture of how much the turmoil coming from China is going to affect everyone in the long run. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
4 out of 10 outside directors at Korea's top 30 conglomerates are former bureaucrats. Korean companies have shown a preference for hiring retired senior government officials for their influence as lobbyists to go around tight regulations. Kim Min-ji has more.
It's been common practice in Korea for conglomerates to hire former bureaucrats as outside directors. Market Tracker CEO Score says among some 600 outside directors at 187 affiliates of the nation's top 30 groups, 39% were former government officials. Only 97 independent directors, or 16%, were from the business community. This is in sharp contrast to the top 100 firms selected by Forbes, which prefer to hire specialists in certain fields. Among 815 independent directors, almost 3/4 were former businessmen, while ex-bureaucrats accounted for less than 10%. Korean companies tend to show a strong preference for retired senior bureaucrats because of their close ties with political circles or the government, which can help them to exert influence. The U.S., on the other hand, prefers those with on-the-job experience. At U.S. retail giant Walmart, for example, 5 out of 9 independent directors are from business circles, including the CEOs of Instagram and Yahoo. Korea's top conglomerate, Samsung Group, hired roughly a third of its outside directors who were former government officials, while the figure stood at about 7% for former businessmen. At 5 Korean conglomerates, including Doosan Group and CJ Group, the proportion of former bureaucrats topped 60%. However, the ratio of outside directors from government circles in Korea is on the decline. The number of former bureaucrats fell 7% from 2013, reducing the overall proportion by almost 3%. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
That brings us to the end of our newscast. More updates coming up at 10 p.m. Korea time. Stay tuned and goodbye for now.